The fact that my wife overprotected our children and refused to allow anyone to touch them was detrimental to our marriage. We have been together for 14 years, and we have been married for 9 years. My wife's name is Laura. When we were in high school, we kicked off everything together. We got married at the age of 20, despite the fact that our high school loves had broken up. While I was attending college, she was working part-time to make ends meet. Because my parents paid for my undergraduate education, and her parents assisted us in renting an apartment, we were thankful that we were able to avoid going into debt. In the interim between my time at university, we held a small wedding with only immediate family members. It was only a few months after our wedding that we found out she was expecting a child. Unsurprisingly, we were displeased. In the beginning, we intended for me to complete my college education and get employment so that she could go back to school and earn her degree before we had any family members. We were not reckless, so before everyone yells at me, let me clarify. Safety measures were taken. I occasionally used condoms for my own protection, and she was using birth control at the time. There is no birth control that could prevent our baby girl from kicking us in the rear end. During the early stages of her pregnancy, Laura was not overjoyed. I proposed the A word and assured her that I would support her in any situation. Her instant response was no due to the fact that her family is religious. After 2 years of being together, we finally had our first sexual encounter. When I proposed to her and made her my fiancée, which was during the 4th month, we were finally able to cohabit the same space. My wife gradually became more comfortable with the idea of carrying a baby inside of her, and at approximately 18 weeks, she felt the baby move around in her stomach. We were able to determine the gender of the baby. It was a sudden shift, as I realized after some reflection. It was fine from the beginning of her first pregnancy, but I didn't recognize it at the time. By the time we found out that she was expecting, she had already been accepted into an accounting class, and I had already secured a job opening. During her pregnancy, she began attending classes and continued to do so. During the 31st week, she took multiple sick days despite the fact that she was in good health, which drew my notice. I approached her, and she immediately began to cry. Assertion that she did not wish to continue her education while she was pregnant due to the fact that her stomach was expanding and everyone was noticing it. My immediate assumption was that she was feeling ashamed of the fact that she was pregnant in front of her younger peers. After speaking with her, I came to the conclusion that she was not ashamed. Instead, she was concerned about getting hurt. She dreaded the possibility of slipping down the stairs, sliding, eating anything that was not appropriate, or accidentally drinking alcohol. As is the case with everyone else, I was perplexed and thought that her worries were irrational. If someone were to purposefully hurt a pregnant woman, what would they be doing? In answer to my inquiry about being threatened, she gave me a negative reaction. In order for the baby to be able to go to school, she asked me to let her drop out, either a daycare or a babysitter. She assured me that she will study later. It was a few months later when she gave birth to our lovely daughter. From the moment we met her, both my wife and I fell in love with her. Only during the last few months of her pregnancy did my wife leave the house to go to her doctor's appointments. My wife would not be left alone for the entire day, so I called her mother and asked her to spend some time with my wife. Even though my wife did not get along with the concept, she did like the fact that her mother would assist her in doing difficult chores around the house. What's worse after birth? There was no one who assisted my wife with the baby. Because my wife and I are the oldest, our daughter is the first grandchild on both of our parents' sides of the family. There was a lot of interest in seeing her, but my wife was really cautious and we were so overwhelmed with holding our child that it irritated a lot of people. Everyone started disseminating rumors about her. Due to the fact that she was a new mom, I made an effort to protect her and asked our family to give her some consideration. Our daughter was not willing to accept assistance from Laura. Her permission to parent my child was quite limited. Despite the fact that she was fatigued, she refused to let anyone, including myself, assist her with our child. She had been suffering from insomnia for several days before she finally fell asleep for almost 6 hours. Taking care of our infant by myself was necessary since I wanted her to get some rest. I also changed her diapers and fed her milk that had been pumped by Laura. Upon waking up, Laura had a mental state of. The individual had a breakdown and branded me a bad person for allowing her to sleep, while also labeling herself an awful mother for not caring for our child. I, too, experienced feelings of being overpowered and frustrated. Following my putting our daughter to bed and closing the door, we engaged in a lengthy discussion or fight. As a result of her fear that something would occur to our child without her presence, she broke down in tears. According to what she had read, neonates had passed away suddenly or while they were in the care of another person. I pondered whether or not this was typical. I had the impression that it was a mother who was concerned for her child at the time. I've heard that new mothers have fluctuations in their hormone levels. I let her know that I understood her desire to keep me away from our child, but that she was unable to prevent me from being there. I assured her that we would tend to our child, collaborating as a group. She untied the knot so that I could take care of our infant and allow her to lie down and sleep. The idea that we could send our daughter to daycare or ask a grandparent to babysit was one of the things that I tried to convince our daughter to start attending college again. The suggestion was immediately shot down by her, citing the fact that our daughter was still a toddler and that this was an important time for her to begin remembering things. As a result of the fact that she was obligated to raise her daughter, she will not permit her to develop feelings for anyone else. In an effort to convince her of the significance of education, I made an effort. I revealed to her that in the event that something were to happen to me, she would be required to obtain a degree. If she did not have a solid career to support herself and our child, she would have a difficult time making ends meet. This appeared to be successful, and she agreed to study, but only in the comfort of her own home and online. It was expected of her that she take a test at a testing center. During the time when our daughter turned 3, I found out that my wife was pregnant once more. Due to the fact that we were under protection, I was perplexed as to how this occurred. In response to my inquiry, she stated that she occasionally failed to remember to take her medication. Due to the fact that contraception was not her job and I was not careful either, I wanted to get angry with her, but I didn't want to blame her because I wasn't careful too. I had a job, so I didn't have to worry about money. You did an excellent job. Because our parents assisted us in getting started, we were able to save money over time without taking out any student loans. It occurred once again with the second baby. She did not venture out of the house very often. We were the only people who were permitted to be in her presence. She occasionally has her sibling with her. Aside from going to appointments, taking tests, and attending to our child's requirements, she hardly left the house. One more time, I attempted to talk to her about being possessive, but she never wanted to do so. It was only after the baby was born that she allowed me and her mother to be around her and the children. She had returned. I can very vividly recall seeing dark circles under her eyes and advising her that she shouldn't be carrying so much weight by herself. She would allow me to take 25% when I am at home. She was dissatisfied with the way other people handled matters. In spite of the fact that my wife was exhausted and drooping when she went to bed after the birth of our second child, our sexual life decreased as a result. Occasionally, she would convince the children to sleep in the same room as us since she detested the idea of leaving them alone in another room. After reading an article about a baby who passed away as a result of co-sleeping, she stopped what she was doing and gave me a lengthy lecture to ensure that I would never do it again. On the contrary, I had no intention at all. I was in a state of panic, but I eventually gave in and let her to take care of the children. No matter what she did. Considering that it was for the protection of our children, I reasoned that it couldn't be too terrible. When our children were older, I made it a habit to always use protection when we had sexual encounters, much to her dismay. But at that time I didn't care. I did not want Laura, who had become more settled since the children were older, to be upset by the arrival of a new baby. Overprotective of our children, Laura continued to be involved in their lives. Her job was located close to our home following. The preschool began for our youngest child. Before she went to work, she took them to school, and then she came back to pick them up after work. Buses for students are included in our itinerary. The data on bullying and accidents involving school buses are what she uses to argue that it is a poor idea when I offer it. When our eldest child expressed interest in spending the night at her closest friend's residence, my wife came dangerously close to losing her cool. I comforted my child to sleep by cradling her, and assuring her that she would receive a great deal more reading material. She finds that reading helps her to stop crying. I was able to convince the parents of her best buddy to, in order to accommodate the overnight stay at our home. Our youngest child is 5 years old, and my wife is expecting our third child at this time, so she managed to persuade me one evening. In order to avoid giving away the way in which she enticed me, I will say that if you are a guy reading this, you will understand how alluring it is when they whisper in your ear to complete within. In spite of the fact that my wife had become more calm, I had the impression that she had become more lenient with herself and the children as we grew older. It was essential to have this background. The event took place a week ago. When my kid was participating in a sport last week, a random little guy in her class accidentally kicked a ball at her head for no apparent reason. When her teachers hurried her to the hospital, she was in need of sutures when they arrived. As expected, my wife went completely insane. After losing control, she burst into tears. While our baby is doing well and the sutures will heal in a short amount of time, my wife is experiencing a lot of distress. After the parents of the boys came to apologize to us with their 8-year-old son, who appeared to be in a state of fear, my wife became extremely angry. Additionally, she threatened to file a lawsuit for restraining orders and damages. There is no way that I could ever know where the thought came from. People's parents were taken aback. I quickly expressed my regret and then escorted them out. my wife went on and on about filing a lawsuit. Then, she talked of skipping school in order to educate the children at home. As a result of hearing about school shootings across the country, she believes that this is the most secure choice. She continued to argue that going to school was both futile and dangerous. After the event, I made a mistake that I deeply regret. Send her a yell. I was enraged and upset at the same time. After years of frustration, I finally let go. I didn't realize that she was there. I am now carrying my child. As she walked away, she looked at me with tears in her eyes. Over the course of a week, neither one of us has shown regret or apologized. When we talk, it is only about the children. I will not allow the children to be taken out of school. They should have the opportunity to grow up and have a typical school life with their mates. Due to the fact that my wife is so protective, I will not take such from them. I have no idea where to go. Except for this problem, life is going swimmingly. She is the most amazing woman I've ever encountered. Not only does she love me deeply, but I also love her. The funniest part is before children are born. What a timid person my wife was. Due to her aversion of conflict, she would avoid getting into arguments. Her shyness made it difficult for her to make friends. The companions. Everything changed when I became a mother. In the beginning, it was incredible for me, as the father of our children and her husband, to witness a woman who was reserved and shy become enraged and loud for her child. We are reaching a point where her love and devotion to our children is becoming too much for both of us. There is a suffocation attack on my daughter. The fact that she is constantly determined to make the ultimate choice about the children puts a strain on our relationship. I want to be able to have an equal say in the concerns of our children without being condemned for having a different opinion than Mom. Another one is on its way, and I am terrified of it. The time for my vasectomy has been scheduled. My third was completed by me. My concern is how she will interact with the new boy. Although I am thinking of going to therapy, she will be difficult to convince. Are there any other things I can do to reassure her about the children? I despise the fact that our relationship is deteriorating. The AITA responds to, prior to having a second or third child, you ought to have found a solution to this problem. If you do not seek therapy for your wife, she will damage the skills that your children will need in the real world. Oh. The very last thing I will be concerned about is my wife causing physical harm to our children. She becomes quite anxious whenever they fall and injure their knee. Due of her aversion to needles, she is not able to witness them getting vaccinated because she is too fragile. It does not concern me that she could cause them physical harm. It is more concerning to me that she is mentally draining our children. To begin, it is never too late. Discuss this matter with your primary care physician. You need to have done that as soon as the first baby was born, and she began behaving in this manner, but you are already noticing the impacts on your daughter, and this will only get worse and have a significant impact on the mental health of your children. It is emotionally damaging for your children to be subjected to the unreasonable behavior of your wife. I am OOP. It is now clear to me that this is a major matter. As suggested in one of the comments, I am making arrangements to meet with a marriage counselor in order to ensure that she does not consider me to be insane for suggesting that she get professional assistance. I will inquire with the counselor about referring her to a therapist. I am no longer going to stand for this. PPA examination is something that I strongly advocate for her. She is in desperate need of severe. Were you ever told that she could put her faith in you? Sometimes, in order to make something more real to me, I have to say it out loud. This is a recommendation to help her feel less anxious. Many of those feelings manifested themselves during the course of my pregnancies. Oops, I'll make a greater effort to earn people's trust. My belief is that she benefits from positive reinforcement. Let's hope that she believes me. The most recent update is on September 17th, 2023. Good morning, everyone. A month's time. I blogged on Reddit a while ago about how my wife's overprotection of our children was having a negative effect on our marriage. Any new information on all of that? Please be aware that some of the concluding statements in this piece may be distressing to you. Additionally, the upgrade did as well. The phrase "occurred" is more accurate. It was 2 days later when my wife discovered my website post on my phone. In the middle of the night, while our youngest child was running a fever, she came across my notification. The fact that she quickly searched through my phone while I was sleeping is likely due to the fact that she believed I was having an affair. None of us would consider this to be a deal breaker. As a result of having passwords, we are able to utilize one another's mobile devices anytime we please. It was a rookie mistake on my part to forget to turn off notifications from Reddit. After that, my wife went online and read the post and the comments. My wife was nowhere to be found when I woke up the following morning. Considering that my son was ill, I anticipated that she would be with him. I went to his room and found that he was all right, but my wife was not. In no way. As I searched the home, I discovered her in the living room, which was completely dark. I turned on the lights, and that's when she stood before me like a ghost. Her eyes were wide with tears, and she was oblivious to her surroundings. When I heard that something was happening, I hurried to her. When I discovered that she had my phone, my heart sank to its lowest point. Despite my best efforts, she refused to engage in conversation. After a great deal of probing, she finally looked me in the eye and asked, "Should they be concerned about me?" Hearing her voice, which was broken, was excruciating. There is nothing I can say to her. They threatened that I would kill them. It appeared as though she was engaging in hyperventilation, which was a terrifying sight. While she was staring at nothing for a considerable amount of time without reacting, she told her to leave her alone. Following the typical routine, the children got up for school and went to look for my wife. When my wife witnessed the children attempting to, she was convinced that she had seen a ghost. Get in touch with her. There was a look of fear on her face as she jumped up from the sofa and raced to our room to hide. The children exhibited both fear and confusion. I made a promise to them that I would allow them to skip school today, and that I would drop them off at their grandparents'. It was their excitement that prompted them to quickly get ready. After some time had passed, my daughter inquired about her mother. Having a little daughter is intuitive. I mentioned that her mother suffered from a simple illness and need rest in order to get better. It is beneficial to give Mama a hug if she is crying, like she taught me to do. Because I was unaware that my daughter had witnessed my wife's anxiety attacks, it broke my heart to learn that she had seen them. Prior to my return home, I entrusted the care of the children to their grandparents. After going over the reviews, I decided to schedule a session of treatment for that particular week. When I arrived home, my wife did not acknowledge my presence, eat, move, or engage in any other activity. There was a concern that she would hurt herself. On the other hand, she never causes harm while she was carrying the baby. I have taken note. I was able to detect that she was trying to conceal herself when I told her that I had dropped the children off at her parents' house. She inquired about the whereabouts of the children. It is possible that the remarks were still somewhat fresh in her mind, which is why she fought me on it. It was challenging for about a week. In order to provide an explanation, I urged her mother to extend the children's stay with their grandparents. They were there for us, and made sure that the children were dropped off at school each day. My wife was notified that I had planned treatment for her, and that I would take her regardless of whether or not she wanted to go. Only on this one point did she agree with me throughout the entire week. Looking at her was a challenge. Every night she will weep herself to sleep. As a result of her panic attacks, I occasionally found her talking to herself after she had finished her task. Her initial few rounds of treatment did not show any signs of improvement. She did not make any move. It was not difficult to continue working when I was on maternity leave. Because I could feel her suffocating without seeing the children, I took her to her parents' house every other day. She was too conflicted to ask me about it, so I did it for her. On the other hand, my wife chose to avoid them and just catch a glimpse of them from a distance. Due to the fact that this was the longest period of time he had been away from her since birth, he longed for her and tried to wriggle his way into her arms. When he attempted to do so, however, my wife experienced panic attacks, which caused him harm. That week was terrible. It cost me spending more time with our children while she was at home to demonstrate to them that she and us loved them. I told them that my mother is sick and needed assistance, and that I am doing everything in my power to assist her. After a fortnight, I brought the children back to us. Following a period of more than 5 sessions, my wife resumed her conversation with the children, although she maintained her distance from them. At this point, I was the primary caregiver. Because she was more familiar with them than I was, she was always the one to tell me what to do. Although I mentioned it in my previous piece, I had a sneaking suspicion that her first pregnancy altered the way she viewed the world. I was correct. 9 years ago, my wife was in her 24th week of pregnancy when she met someone. It is incomprehensible how a single occurrence altered the course of our lives. My wife decided to continue her education after she became pregnant, so she quit her part-time work at a diner on the side. Despite the fact that she does not have any courses, my wife continues to go to the diner in order to finish her homework, because it is within walking distance. During that particular day, my wife needed the use of the restroom. Following her entry into the women's restroom, she became aware of sounds and groans that were excruciating. It appeared to be a woman who was in discomfort. Upon approaching the woman's stall, our wife inquired as to whether or not she required assistance. After that, despite her initial reluctance, the woman eventually opened the door to her rescuer. She was experiencing a miscarriage. I am 17 weeks pregnant, and I am of middle age. Despite her horror, my wife instantly dropped down on her knees to assist the other woman. She was bleeding in the bathroom. In the process of helping her relax, the woman became aware that she was pushing the fetus out of her uterus. She then asked my wife to catch it so that she could bury it in the appropriate manner. The fetus, according to my wife, made her feel as though she was about to die. She stated that he was covered in blood and about the size of her hand. A spare handkerchief was used to swaddle the newborn, and she assisted the mother who was bleeding to stand up in comfort. The woman was taken to the hospital, where she was treated by medical professionals. During the entire day, my wife was with her. After she had finished speaking, my wife sat down next to her, lost consciousness in the middle of the process, as well as providing emotional support. It was at this point that the woman shared her experience with my wife. Apparently, her partner is abusive toward her. Earlier that day, he struck her, and she managed to get away, although she was severely injured in the stomach. Whenever the suffering grew intolerable, she went into the first restaurant that she went to. According to the mother, she died of her second child. While she was working, she left her 2 girls, ages 7 and 4, with her boyfriend. This occurred approximately 1 year ago. On the other hand, he was too busy to see them because he was hosting a party. When she saw a cat while she was playing outside, the young girl, who was just 4 years old, raced into the road. A car traveling at a high rate of speed fatally injured the young child. Listening to another father fail to provide for his child, it warmed up my blood. I have no idea how she managed to remain with him for an entire year after that. An awful justification for a person. My wife was advised by the woman that no one could care for a child as much as a mother could. In light of the fact that no one else provides the same level of care for her children as she does, she warned her not to put her trust in anyone else. Following that day, my wife never saw her again, but the chemical makeup of her brain underwent such a profound transformation that she began to view everyone as a potential danger to our children. It was only natural that she would use caution when walking while she was pregnant. I can only imagine how terrifying it must have been to hold a dead fetus in your hands. Why would she avoid any of them? It is necessary to unlearn behaviors that are associated with trauma. Without a doubt, they call for some time. Her therapist gave me an update on her condition and appeared to have a positive outlook on the treatment of my wife. It might not be as terrible as you think. My wife is going to be prescribed medication for worry and tension once the baby is born. According to the doctor, her due date is 1 week away. So baby number 3 continues to give me the creeps. I won't let the mother's new baby prevent her from going to treatment. It is for her and our children that I will keep her going. In order to devote more time to my family, I decided to quit using Reddit nonetheless. I just now became aware that Shadow Babin had written this almost a month ago. After I became aware of the plethora of comments that accused me of lying and stated that this was a story, I became concerned. Obviously, nobody believes anyone on the internet, specifically Reddit, and I can see why. I am grateful to you for your kind words. Being able to read a positive one among the others was pleasant. Several weeks ago, my wife gave birth to a happy and healthy boy. Despite the fact that she is still in therapy, I am observing some little shifts in her attitude toward our newborn compared to the 2 previous occurrences. In accordance with my wishes and the comments, I underwent a vasectomy. Initially, my wife was against it, but she eventually signed off on it. To prevent myself from becoming overwhelmed, I am paying greater attention to her this time. It took me some time to realize that the woman event actually took place, therefore I can understand why some people assume it is a hoax. This occurs in a variety of locations for a lot of people. It just so happened that my wife helped a woman who was struggling. There is something that I do not understand. I am not responsible for convincing other people. When I found out what had happened to my wife, I felt it was important to keep you informed.